Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back. Brandon again. Today I want to talk about the StrongArmSport squat bar, which you can see right here. I've had it for a couple of weeks and I wanted to give you guys my feedback on it. Before I do, let's give a little context on squat bars in general. So what makes a squat bar a squat bar? In most cases, they're always thicker than a normal power bar. So this particular bar is 32 millimeters. You will find some that are 31 or 30, but it's definitely greater than a normal power bar, which tends to average around 29 millimeters. Compare that to an Olympic lifting bar, which is 28 millimeters, or even a deadlift bar, which is 27. This thing is really thick and feels really good in your hands. So it's thicker. The bar itself is also longer. This bar is a little over 97 inches, which puts it roughly 10 inches longer than my normal power bars. With that, the length comes into play in two different factors. Number one, you can fit more on the sleeves because the sleeves are longer. So this bar is meant for people that are squatting a lot of weight. We're talking 800, 900, 1,000 pounds. So in order to fit all that weight, the sleeves need to be longer if you're not using competition style plates. So that's why they're there. The shaft itself is also longer, and that allows for bigger people who tend to be squatting that much weight can fit their hands comfortably because they tend to prefer a wider grip. Now I will throw out the caveat that most of these people that are squatting this kind of weight are not necessarily in the same class as you and I. So they're geared lifters. Maybe they're single ply, maybe they're multi-ply, maybe they're geared in other senses. They're probably using a monolift. But this bar is meant to be stiff and rigid, especially when loaded up with, again, 1,000 pounds or so on squat, maybe even more in some cases. So that's the basics of what a squat bar is. It allows you to squat higher weights, and depending on the federation and the gear you're using, it allows you to squat higher weights. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Think about that one for a little bit. So what makes me wanted to get this bar? What makes me wanted to get this bar? Why did I want to get this bar? So for me, initially when I got into powerlifting, didn't really care about the federation. I still don't really care about the federation as much, but I did a couple of RPS meets, which uses a monolift, which has a lot of equipped lifters, which doesn't do a lot of drug testing. Had a lot of people squatting big weights, higher weights. But as part of that, they used a squat bar, and I liked it a lot. Although I wasn't squatting enough weight to really put it to the test, so to say, having a thick barbell on your back that's extremely aggressively knurled and very stiff feels really good and helps build confidence. If you're like me and have squatted heavier weights before, or relatively heavy for what you lift, and you're using a bar that's like an Olympic bar at 28 millimeters, or maybe even some power bars, whatever the case may be, and you're using maybe bumper plates, having a lot of whip and flex in the bar as you're walking it out, as you're coming out of the hole, as you're locking it up, and that momentum can really throw you off. So much so, in fact, that you could potentially dump the weights and get hurt or injured, which is something you never want to do. And for me, the squat has always been probably one of the most mental lifts. If the bar and weight feel good on my back when I'm walking it out, that builds so much confidence going into the rest of my squat. And having this thicker specialty squat bar always gave me that feeling. So I really always wanted to get my hands on one. The problem for me particular is they're expensive. All specialty bars tend to be fairly expensive. So it's kind of a weird thing because, they're specialty bars. You're not going to be using them as much as maybe a normal power bar. And even that being said, even though you'll get limited use out of it, the pricing always seems to be so much more expensive than a normal bar. So it's really been a struggle for me. And up until recently, the most economic decision to get a squat bar would be a Texas Power Bar squat bar by Buddy Caps, which retails without shipping for a bare steel bar $390 at a minimum. I say at a minimum because if you buy it through like Elite FTS, it goes up to like $470. Same thing with like lifting large. Now that Texas Power Bars has their own website and is selling bars directly, it's a little bit cheaper, but it's still $390 before shipping. Factor in shipping, you're looking at $450, at least to get it to where I live. Now, when you take a look at the StrongArmSport bar that I have here, the list price on this in US dollars is $243. With shipping, because it's coming from Canada in most cases, although I do believe they are opening up a US distribution center, tends to be about $58. So all in price, $300 for this versus before the only option, a minimum of $450. And that's at a minimum. So there isn't a ton of players in the squat bar game, but for instance, you might have heard of a Mastodon squat bar. I think it's sold through Elite FTS. I think that retails for like $1,000. There's also an Iron Wolf squat bar, which I've been lucky enough to use, which is kind of like the holy grail of squat bars, if you will. I think even used, and they haven't made those in a while from my understanding, even used, those sell for like $1,000 at a minimum. So there hasn't been a lot of inexpensive options when it comes to squat bars. And usually when you're talking about gym equipment, inexpensive and quality don't go hand in hand. But knowing that I've used the StrongArmSport deadlift bar, which I've reviewed, and I'll leave that in the description box below. I've used the Bells of Steel power bar, which is kind of like their sister company. I've liked that a lot. I've reviewed their combo rack, which offers a good value if you're looking for a combo rack. I really want to get my hands on the squat bar to see if it could kind of maintain that momentum that I've seen from the company putting out good products at very good prices. And I have to say, I haven't been disappointed. So I really like this barbell, not only because the price is right, but also because what it affords me to do. Now, obviously, again, I'm not going to be squatting enough weight to really warrant this type of bar. But that being said, it still feels extremely well with 400, 500 pounds on my back because it's that much stiffer than a normal power bar. Add to the fact that it's longer, even though I don't take a wide grip when I squat. What really helps me out is when you're squatting in a Rogue rack, which I believe is 48 inches wide, I have the tendency with other power bars, depending on where the bar's set up and where I rack it and where the plates are, to bang the uprights on walkouts, which again plays into that fact that can really waver my confidence and kind of can throw off my squats a little bit. So the fact that this bar is longer and wider, I never have that problem anymore. I talked about the knurling a little bit already. It is extremely aggressive on this bar. In fact, it's the same knurling that's on their deadlift bar, which is actually a really positive in my mind because it feels really good to grip and on your back. And speaking of gripping on your back, you may have noticed as well that the center knurl is elongated. That's because you don't have to worry about pulling this on your shins like you would a power bar for deadlifts or anything of that nature. In fact, some specialty squat bars actually have the whole shaft knurled. This one, roughly 12 inches of center knurling with that aggressive knurling. So it's going to sit on your back and it's going to stay on your back. So I really like this bar. I mentioned the Texas Power Bar initially was $390 if it's a bare steel. All of StrongArmSport's bars are bare steel. They do have chrome plated sleeves. I've been getting some questions on people about how they've been holding up because I have a couple of their bars, as I've mentioned. They are all bare steel. They've held up extremely well for me, but let me give you the caveat that the fact is, number one, I'm in a somewhat temperature controlled area in my basement. But also it's been the colder months here since I've gotten the bars, and where that really is going to be put to the test with oxidation is once the summer comes around, it starts getting humid, you start getting more moisture. Keep that in mind that if you live in a very hot and humid area, you're probably going to have to spend a little bit more time on upkeep of these bars. But again, the price differential for me, I think really warrants it. In fact, even if you take a look at the Texas Power Bars and you go to the next step up, which is black zinc, I'm not really fond of the black zinc bars in general because that black zinc tends to wear over time and then you have like a bar with spots, but also because that black zinc tends to also fill in the knurling and dull it a little bit. So you really can't beat the feel of a bare steel bar. It really feels really good. And as you can tell, this one looks great. It's nice and shiny now. And I think with regular upkeep, it should never really be a problem for me. The only negative I would really say about this bar is number one, besides the fact that it's overkill, but again, the fact that it's $240 offsets that in my mind because you're not wasting money on a specialty bar that you probably won't use or put to the true max and spending $500. The only real downside is the fact that the knurling, which is supposed to be powerlifting knurling, the marks right here, are actually about an inch closer than they should be. So they're different than what's spec'd on the website. I let the owner, Mike, know about this, and he said it's more than likely just a manufacturer issue. He will bring it up to them, so that will be corrected going forward. It's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but if you're used to setting up a certain way, so for me for squats, I usually put my pinky on the rings. Just my thumbs here tend to be a little bit more in than they would normally. On a normal bar, I'd probably be about right there. So it was just a little bit interesting at first, brought it to his attention. But again, in the grand scheme of things, it's very small, especially when you consider, again, the pricing and the quality you're getting for this bar. So if you're in the market for a squat bar, I would highly recommend this as the specs line up to all of the other popular bars out there. Not to mention the price just can't be beat. Literally, there's no one out there offering a squat bar anywhere close to this price. Or if you want to squat and not ever have to hit the uprights, you can do that. Or if you just like to buy gym equipment and do cool stuff, this is always a good option as well. If you have other questions on this bar or other things by StrongArmSport or other equipment videos you want to see, let me know in the comments section below. But in the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and stay big.